Hello, hello, soulful seekers. Welcome back to Trauma and Transcendence with me, your host, Amanda M. Dodd. Today, we have a different opportunity than we usually have. I'm actually here live, so if you are catching this, you are welcome to send in your questions, and in theory, I will be able to see them. This is actually my first time doing the live. I had a hard time. It didn't go exactly where I wanted it. So it's not on the Trauma and Transcendence Facebook page, but it's supposed to be on my Facebook profile as well as LinkedIn. And then, of course, I will have this uploaded later to all of the usual podcast channels in case you're not here live. One of these days, we will get it together and we will all show up live together, and that would be fun, wouldn't it? So, perhaps in the future, what I'll try to do is to plan for that. I just want to double check. Oh, yeah, that is where it's supposed to be. Very nice. In theory, I will be able to see your comments and questions and anything that you've got. So, here we are. This episode, there are a few things I want to talk about. I've been wanting to do this podcast on surrender. Surrender as a tool, surrender as a spiritual practice for a little while now, because I have to say this has been a self-discovered tool for me, and it's one that has gotten me out of very, very tight spaces multiple times. And then later, what I had discovered was it's got a name. There's a way that people have known it and practiced it. And so knowing that was immensely helpful. And I'd love to share it for you, for your spiritual practice. And in case you're in a tight space and you need a way out, this is a wonderful way to do it. But before we begin, so clearly I am here, I am live. If you're catching this later, it'll be all the same to you, I think. But the reason is it's July 4th. So happy Independence Day. Hopefully, you've had a safe and wonderful day. It feels a little weird to me that it's not like a weekend, and I'm feeling a little off by that. It's strange, isn't it? In any case, hopefully you've done some things that you've enjoyed, you've had fun, you've connected with people in a way that brings you so much light. And that's so important that we get together now, in person especially. I feel like more and more of us have needed that in person connection and contact. I know for myself in these past few years, I definitely have. So it's nice that I get to do that and get to be here. It's a little strange having it be a Thursday and not being in the salt cave doing meditation. Um, and I will have that chance next week. Next week, I will be doing a chakra harmony. So I will do a long guided meditation through the chakra system. We will look very, very in depth at the 7 chakras plus a couple of additional ones that I like to work with. Great way to create some shift, to kind of do an internal body scan and see what is happening for you and make some energetic shifts and changes. And I love doing this because often it can be very in depth and we can learn about where patterns and habits and ways of doing things come from. This is very, very insightful. And for those who attend, when they manage to really listen and pay attention and create a self care practice out of it, it becomes then an energetic technique that you can take home and practice for yourself a whole lot regularly and more often, which is very much ideal when it comes to working on things like that, particularly if you're developing your mediumship. So that's where I'll be next Thursday. The week after that, no salt cave meditation. I am going to Vegas. I know it's so weird to hear me say because I'm incredibly introverted and Vegas is really not my energy, my type of scene, but I'm going for a very good reason, and that is because it is HypnoThoughts Live. That is the biggest hypnotherapy conference in the United States, and I can't wait to be participating this year because I'm not just an attendant this year, I'm coming as a presenter. And so I'm presenting something that's actually really close to my heart and integral to my practice, which is helping others connect with their loved ones in spirit. But this talk specifically is geared towards hypnotists, hypnotherapists, and coaches who are entering into the hypnotic realms of how they can guide their clients and to do this a little more effectively. So, me having the weird combination of being a spiritual medium and then evolving into a hypnotherapist, found this little subsection and kind of a crossover of these skills and abilities. And what I realized the first couple of times that I started practicing hypnosis and self hypnosis is, this feels familiar. And it was is just that moment of I've been here so many times before. And I started to kind of question and prompt and play with that. So what I became aware of is when I do that deep spiritual work, that is where I go. I go into self hypnosis, but then I'm accessing those realms where loved ones in spirit are, those realms where ancestors, guardians, great healing, angels, all of those things are available as well. And incidentally, it is the same place we speak to the body from. And it's that sweet area of the subconscious mind. And what I found after some trial and some error and some testing is there are some very clear blocks to us getting in the way of speaking to our loved ones in spirit. So, my talk is all about identifying those blocks, some of the ways that I've gotten around them, and how to better enhance this practice for hypnotherapy clients so that I'm removing myself as the middleman, as a medium, and instead letting you have your own experiences to be with your loved one in spirit and to have that time. I don't know how many times I've seen a meme of if only heaven had visiting hours. That's exactly what this is. I found a way to harness that and to open that up to more people so that we can all have that catharsis, that healing. I personally needed that. I was actually estranged from my biological father for many years when he'd passed. When he had passed, I'd had an experience and I thought, uh-oh, if you're here, that means you're no longer on earth. You're no longer there. And I wasn't quite done resolving what that meant for me. I had to come to the realization of, oh, our chapter of our time together has changed. It's shortened. And I had unresolved things that I needed to work through. And so doing this kind of work has vastly allowed me to, one, change the nature of the relationship, change the ending of the chapter, two, continue to build a strong relationship despite the fact that he's now in spirit. And I'm so grateful for that because now, as I teach mediumship development students and I help other people, often what happens is he pops up and he's helping me. I'm working with my feet on this realm, he's working with his astral body in that realm. So it's an additional layer of support. Nonetheless, that is what I want to talk about in Vegas. That is my topic, and I can't wait to share it with so many of my colleagues. There are so many wonderful presenters who come to HypnoThoughts Live, hence why I'm going very early. So I'm leaving on the 16th, and I want to say that I don't come back until the 25th or 26th. I've decided I'm going to take my time. I have signed up for some wonderful pre-conference training and some post-conference training. You've heard a little bit about that already. And I wanted to really give myself time to enjoy being there. So have more time to enjoy the Vegas sunshine because Ohio doesn't offer a whole lot of that. And also to enjoy the pool, to actually take some time away from my holistic practice, slow down on client sessions, at least until I get back, and take the time to take the break. Let me turn that off. As I've said to you many times before, one day this phone is going to go missing, and you're going to know that that is the day she's finally had it. In any case, let's get into what I want to talk about today. By the way, if you're going to Vegas, you're going to be at Hypno Thoughts Live, hit me up. I want to hear from you. Let's plan to meet up to grab some tea, some coffee, a quiet chat somewhere. I want to be able to connect and learn all about what's bringing you to Hypno Thoughts Live and what is alive and exciting for you there. So don't delay and let me know. Let me just help my spouse real quick. It never ends. Um, all right. Today, what I want to talk about is surrender. So many of you are familiar with the concept of the dark night of the soul. Or as my favorite spiritual teacher, it's hard to say favorite because there are many, but one of the ones who's had a big, profound impact on my life has been Robert Ohotto. And Robert Ohotto has spoken on Dark Night of the Soul, which he often calls Dark Night of the Ego. And if you watched the last episode with Monica, you know that that's often how I love to phrase that too. And I love to phrase that way because the ego is the one part of us that knows it's not going to transcend this life. The rest of us moves on. We go on to greater lessons and potentials. We get to evolve. We get to have more experiences. We do more healing and catharsis, and we continue on. But the ego, the identity that is limited for this lifetime, does not. And so when you are beginning to have a spiritual awakening, often what is not far behind is the dark night of the soul or dark night of the ego. And it's because your perspective has just expanded. If you've lived life in a certain container and slowly we start to peel away the walls and you get an expanded vision, that's going to change the way that you have perspective and view yourself as a being. And I'm never going to forget what that was like for me because it was just profound the moment that I began to realize, oh, I'm so much more than just this. Not only am I more than this, the this that I am, I can have more say over. I don't have to be at cause of everything that happens in life. And it really is that bigger shift of life happening to us versus life happening for us. And each and every opportunity giving new lessons, new perspectives, and ways to expand and grow. Even now, I'm still expanding, learning, and growing. And now it's just so much more of a smoother, more comfortable ride because I've had that open earlier expansion and change in that way, which was really helpful. Alan, if you are watching this, you are incredibly distracting. I love you. Don't message me privately. I can't answer it. Um, and so, very quickly, what starts to happen is then we start looking at the ways we've been living, the things we've been thinking about, the ways we behave, the patterns, the things we like to do. And then a questioning can kind of happen. And there's a while of cognitive dissonance of, wait, if I'm not just this being that goes beyond this, what am I and what am I responsible for? What is within my choosing? What is within my capacity? And so often during that time, people will start to self isolate a little bit. They might peel away from their typical friendships or social circles to do that inner self discovery work and find out what it's all about and what they are. And so for me, in that time, there was this huge moment of excitement of, oh my God, what if the things that I want in my life can arrive because I'm choosing and I'm placing my energy and I'm taking action steps. And so for a while, I really thought that I could live from that place of anything I want is mine if I just put in everything I have and I am to create it. And very quickly, I learned that that is not always the case, that it's not all 100% free will. It's also not all fate destiny. So there's like a give and a take that kind of happens. It's like looking at a map. Some of the really big coordinates are pre planned, kind of predestined. We've got contracts and things to do there. But the journey in between that can happen lots of different ways. The same way that I'm going to Vegas. Sure, I could fly from Ohio. I could drive from Ohio. There are many other means of travel. I could choose to carpool with somebody. I could, the way that I get there can change. And so I view and feel like life and our spiritual journey is very much akin to that. And so we've got room to play. But that doesn't mean that we are able to then control everything. And I feel like that's where the dark night of the ego really comes in. Of when we are living in a circumstance or a situation that is not of our choosing, that we're not finding pleasant, we're wanting a different outcome with, and we're feeling stuck. So, in those moments, I've seen people stay absolutely stuck. And so that dark night of the soul, that dark night of the ego can go from days, it could be weeks, it could be months. I've seen people in years. I've seen people in over a decade live out of that same pattern. And it's because they've begun to really dig their heels in. And when I say dig their heels in, they're not interested in looking at what the other options are. They've decided they want a specific outcome or that that outcome has to arrive by a specific avenue or channel. And then when it doesn't, uh, they are just so deeply in a corner that they can't get out. And that's actually what had happened to me. And I don't want to cover it in full breath just yet because as I continue the Origins of a Spiritual Medium series that I'm covering on this podcast, you're going to get opportunities to see and experience that. You're going to understand what that first moment really was for me in greater detail. But I do want to cover some of it. So, in short, after I had left well, actually, no, within my first marriage, as that was coming to a place that was incredibly painful to stay and was still also painful to leave. I would say that was when I hit my first moment of surrender. Now, a lot of people interpret surrender as capitulating, as giving up. And I kind of want to take that off the register that that's not exactly it. If I am moving to surrender, it's not that I like it. It's not that I'm okay or in agreement with whatever is occurring, whatever scenario or situation or state of a relationship. It's more that I'm coming to a place of, okay, this is reality. This is what it is. Whether I like it or approve of it, this is factual and current. And I think for some that's hard. And so the idea of surrendering means they're giving up some kind of illusory control. And we're handing something over to something else that maybe wouldn't have our best and highest in mind. It took a while for me to experience and to learn that. And I really had to be in a deep, dark corner to be like, okay, nothing else is working. I have tried A, B, Z, D, Y, W. I've tried them all. I'm stuck. I don't like that I'm stuck. I'm acknowledging that right now I feel stuck. And that's because I'm expecting one outcome in specific. And when I've given and done all that I could and there was nothing more, then came the realization of, there's just no more moves on the chessboard. And if I stayed in resistance, that's that dark night of the soul, that dark night of the ego, it would have gone nowhere. And often that leads people to go into great emotional discomfort. It leads them into those longer kind of depressive states. that we often hear about and see. And so I think I was definitely avoiding a lot of things in life during that first marriage, hence developing a video game addiction to World of Warcraft, where I met my now spouse. We'll get to that eventually. Um, but not before I had really tried to give and do and be everything I could within that marriage first. And very quickly, I started to realize of, oh, this is about more than me. I can't make it work just on my own initiatives. I can't be something that someone else wants if it means that my life force is going to be slowly leaving me because they didn't authentically love me for me. Right around that time, it was interesting because the book Eat, Pray, Love had come out, and actually, she had gone on to make a movie that was Elizabeth Gilbert. If you have not seen it, I highly recommend it. There are things from that movie, concepts that I am still trying to deeply embrace and embody within this life. Particularly, there is a concept of dolce far niente, and I'm trying very, very hard to embrace that, um, because it's one, beautiful, but two, a little tricky to do. Dulce far niente is the concept of slowing down and enjoying the sweetness of nothing. If you've ever had perfectionist tendencies or codependent type traits, that'll be the hardest thing to overcome. And so I'm still working on fully embodying that more now. Wonderful movie, wonderful book. And it was right at that same time where I was having that same experience. And so it was really profound. And I remember I had started reading the book. Someone had sent it to me, partly because they had wanted my marriage to dissolve. Not going to name them, but it wasn't, it was a family member. Um, Either way, I got into reading, and at one point, I remember hitting the bathroom floor on my knees, and I was in agony, and it was like very early in the morning. Um, and I realized that like this life was essentially the same as this other person who'd written this book, and it was all playing out kind of similarly. And I felt so much at reading it on those pages and how she couldn't control it either. She couldn't make it all do what she wanted. There had to be some surrender, there had to be some give. So, we talked a little bit about surrender being an acceptance and not saying I like it or I give up, but an acknowledgement of okay, this thing isn't working. This thing isn't going to go further. I have exhausted my efforts, and that's all there is on that to go forward. Um, it's also needing to let go of control. So when we have kind of carved out an outcome, a way that we want things to go, and then acknowledging, you know what? I don't know how it's going to unfold, and I don't know if I'm going to get what I want. That's a big part of it, and a lot of people have a hard time with that one, and I think it's because it's that feeling of giving up. Another core element, and I think this one have is tricky for people as well, and it was kinda tricky for me then too, because it's trusting a higher power, and that can be different for everybody. For some, a higher power is their higher self. For others, it's source, universe. For some, it's God, the supreme. For others, it's gods, plural. I was in the middle of still kind of trying to map that out for myself. And so the concept of why should I surrender to or ask anyone to help take the reins, Jesus take the wheel kind of thing. It's like if they haven't been here up to now, why should I trust them to show up now? And incidentally, it's because when we surrender, it comes from a very different energy. When done well, Surrender is a game changer. It is a supreme redirector of energy, of focus, of will. You can manifest great changes very, very quickly. And so, what I've learned is I don't take surrender lightly. It's not capitulation. I'll repeat it once more. It's not an act of giving up. It's more, okay, I want to invite you to look at it from this perspective. It is more an act of co creation. You're acknowledging that at that moment, you've done and given everything within your ability, whether that's mental, emotional, physical, energetic, psychic, however. And you're realizing that you just can't continue. It's not sustainable. Either you don't have the energy or there are other factors at play. And then that's that moment if we say, okay, you know what? Source, universe, whomever, I've done my best. I don't see any action steps forward. I'm going to surrender this to you for you to come in and to co create whatever needs to happen next. And I'm choosing to let go of expectations. I'm choosing to let go of outcomes. I'm choosing to hand this over because it's so heavy that if I keep holding on to it, the burden of it will crush me. And I think for lots of us, we have to be in that spot to explore it, don't we? And so in that first marriage, I was already there. And so it was something like 2 or 3 in the morning, Calgary, Alberta, and I was on the bathroom floor. I couldn't tell what liquid was coming out of my eyes or my nose or what I was hacking up out of my mouth because when you're having one of those full body, soul shaking cries, it all feels the same after a while. And I just hit a block and it was like, I don't know anymore. I don't know anything. I don't know what I want. I don't know what I need. I don't know how to please this other person or even meet them halfway. I don't know. And so in that moment, it was a vague, simplistic surrender. The solutions didn't come the next day, but having surrendered, what I did notice was I felt the weight of it beginning to lift. And that I sent out that SOS call out to the energetics of our universe, knowing that and just saying, okay, you know what? I'm ready to look at what other options are on the table. Was enough to give me space and to give me the mental shift in perspective that I needed to even see other options because I was so tunnel visioned in that I couldn't have even seen them. And I think that's a huge part. It's not the whole thing, definitely, but that's a huge part of where the magic happens is letting go of the attachment, letting go of the requirements we have, the expectations, and then just opening to what else is possible. Something better. This or better is what most people say with manifesting. I definitely didn't want more of that because that wasn't working. So it was mostly better, something better, whatever that needed to be or to look like or to feel like. I just knew that I couldn't be doing the same thing. So moving to that place of non attachment is where so many profound abilities, opportunities, and gifts arrive. One, I learned my resilience. And it was a resilience that I didn't even know I had because I don't know that I'd ever needed it quite that way before. There were other times that were testing, but this was unlike anything else. And I will never forget the one of the days where I was preparing to actually physically leave. It was already clear we were heading in different directions, and I was going to return home to Montreal, Quebec, to just kind of figure myself out to work a little bit. And then I thought I probably wanted to move to the US to meet my now spouse, who I'd met online. Um, and so there were so many things along the way. I'd had a lot of pets, I had a lot of attachments. I was essentially leaving the townhome that I'd bought, the life that I knew, any independence that I had in the moment, any security, any comfort. And it was like, well, do you want to hold on to the devil you know, or do you want to take a chance with the one that you don't? And we could talk about that another day too, because there definitely were things that come. I'm not saying that when you practice the act of surrender, that it's going to fix everything for all of your days and nights moving forward. If it did, what would be the purpose of being here and growing and self developing? And so there were still definitely more things that I had to tackle moving forward. But within that moment, what I was keenly aware of is I had to choose me. I was aware that I could have chosen to stay, and I could have chosen to have loved this other person with the whole of my being, with the possibility that I would never measure up, because so far I hadn't. Regardless of my effort on any way, it was never quite enough. And it's like, well, if I do that, am I going to love myself? And I thought, no, it's not possible. I'm never going to be able to love myself. This person's not going to love me in the way that I need to be loved. And they're never going to be satisfied by anything I do or don't do. It was a damned if you do, damned if you don't kind of thing. And so I'll never forget, but then there were a lot of things that had to happen. We were starting to divvy up furniture, things like that, assets, whatever. I was packing my very deeply personal things into Rubbermaids and whatnot. Um, and right before that, I chose to fly out to get home to Montreal, Quebec with one pet. I'd had to rehome a whole bunch. And I didn't know if I'd be able to do that because that was hard and I had a lot of attachment. So many attachments. And he looked me right in the eyes and he said, "How are you so strong?" And I paused for a moment, not to be dramatic, but because I didn't know. I didn't even know that strength was there. I had no idea I had that resilience, that ability. And I think I said something along the lines of, "I don't know." But what I felt was I had no other choice. And so in those moments, we develop so much resilience, so much strength, so much character. And also at that moment, I think I was finally choosing me for the first time in my life ever. And by that time, I was already 26 or 27, somewhere in there. And it was a first. I had never chosen me before, not in that way. I have chosen me since, because every now and then I forget. And life is quick to hand over reminders, which is nice because you can't miss your purpose. You can't miss your destiny. It will keep coming back, it'll keep showing up. So another thing is when we do that, I talked about alleviating the stress, the pressure, the weight. Knowing that we've handed something over, we start to feel the mental release and the mental opening of, you know what? I don't need this exact outcome. Maybe something else wants to arrive and I'm not allowing it by being so mentally attached to a certain thing or just be in resistance to. So the minute you can shift out of that, sometimes we don't know how much we're suffering or how much pain we have until you start to feel the absence of it. And so that was another reason that surrender was just so foundational for me after I'd had that experience with it. It really kind of floored and shocked me. So that was interesting. And it's nice to know that we can have that relief. The other thing that happens is we get to build that spiritual connection. Because when you make a monumental effort, like surrendering and choosing to allow a higher power to come in and to co create with you, then the relationship can develop more. Sometimes relationships can only go as far as there is trust available for them. We see that in human relationships, but it's also the same for our other relationships too. And more profoundly, our relationship with spirit. And I gotta say, looking back at that very moment, my relationship with spirit took off by leaps and bounds. And for a while, it almost felt like I was on an energetic life high because I had just conquered something I didn't know I could do. And it's like, what other dragons can I slay? What else can I do? And so I remember going home for, I think it was a month and a half, maybe 2 months almost, where I worked a little bit. I saved up money, had to apply for a passport and all of those kinds of things. And I just kind of took some space to give myself some time and to see things differently and see what other things I might want to explore. But then when I chose to go to Oregon to meet my spouse, who my now spouse, who I've been married to for almost 15 years, um, it really did feel like we played a joke on the world because we actually drove off into the sunset so many times. And so many times we couldn't help but just like look at each other and be like, wow, you're real. You know, like we broke the matrix. We pranked it, we got out of it, and wow. And so it was kind of surreal at times, but literally there was like an energetic high, a spiritual happiness that I didn't know could have existed. And so my trust, my faith at that time really vastly deepened. And I began to know that there was something greater than me. And sometimes I needed to co create and not just try to have it all my own way. Because had it all gone the way that I'd wanted to at the time, oh man, I don't even want to think about what that life would be or look like. I think it would have been incredibly painful. I don't know how it could have continued. So, to say that I'm relieved now is I'm definitely relieved. And I can't imagine a life any different than what I've got now. And I've really worked hard to have this, to be this, and to do the things that I do in the way that I do them. It's all been very deliberate and intentional, and working with being aligned. So, yeah, that's wild. I can't even fathom another route, but it just is humbling for sure. You know, humbling to know, this is my life, but there is something greater than me that has consciousness that knows other things for me are better. Other things are going to be more satisfying, more fulfilling, more comprehensive. I'm going to grow and achieve new heights in different ways. And I'd like to say that I stopped needing to practice surrender, but if anything, I find that I probably practice it more now than ever. That I'm quicker to let up and say, okay, I'm going to do my best, and source, you come in and fill in the rest. Something that I like to tell clients a lot is there's a book by Tosha Silver called It's Not Your Money. And the reason I love the book is because it's not just about money. She's got all of these little spiritual tools and concepts to look at. One of them is actually what she calls a God box. And the whole idea is to create a box, a place of sacredness where you are then surrendering those things that are either too painful or too heavy for you to continue with, the things that are no longer sustainable. And I thought, what a beautiful way to make that tangible, to make that physical, to make it manifested and to be able to see it. So then you have to actually create a small ritual, an act of writing down the thing that you are surrendering and putting it in the box and trusting that once it's in the box that you've let it go. So if you're trying to practice surrender and it's hard, I would say definitely check out the book by Tosha Silver. Consider that aspect of creating a God box. She also talks about change me prayers. And I didn't know about change me prayers before the book or at the times when I practiced surrender already several times over. But in hindsight, I did have um, several moments where I was reflecting of, okay, I can't do this. I don't know what to do anymore. Um, Move me, change me, put me where you need me. I yield. You have better foresight and understanding of the map and the territory than I do. I've gotten lost on the journey from A to B, and I don't know how to get to what's next. So take me, guide me. I will open my mind, my heart, and I will be present and participant in going. So, those really are the most profound, deepest ways to pray, to connect. It's a total road opener for sure. And it's a wild way to manifest, particularly because those perspectives that you don't have. I often like to joke that in terms of spirituality, we have the cheap seats. Unless you're going on lots of journeys with past life regression or looking into between lives or quantum healing hypnosis, your perspective is kind of small. You don't get to see things from different angles or from the higher seats above or from the really more exclusive box for celebrities where they kind of look and see the whole field. Like, we really do just have the cheap seats, and so we're trusting that being, whatever that is for you, that has the full perspective is going to be choosing the things that are in alignment for us, that are better for us, that we can't see for ourselves. In some way, I would even argue that when it comes time for a surrender, when you're in that dark night of the ego, dark night of the soul, I want to say that it's a vibration changer, that we're stuck in a limited vibration at a frequency that can't expand. And the act of surrender, using surrender as a spiritual tool in that moment, it's like it is a mechanic using a monkey wrench on your vibration, on your frequency, and lifting and adjusting it upwards so that you are then shifting from where you were to where you need to be in alignment with the things that are yours. One thing that I like to remember about my Karuna Reiki teacher, Linda Kingsbury, is after every class, after every sacred moment, she would bow her head and say, "Thank you for the blessings that are mine." And that's always kind of stuck with me. But sometimes when we're a low vibration, we're a low frequency, we can't see or even fathom the blessings that are ours. And I feel like that act, that very sacred, important, sincere act of surrender is a game changer in that way. It'll come in, it'll adjust our frequency, it'll put us on the timeline within the space that we need to be for the blessings that are ours. So, hopefully, by now, you have either begun to identify moments of life where you've participated in surrender, whether that was consciously or unconsciously. Um, I often laugh and say that I learn things the hard way, and that's because I do a lot of things unconsciously first. And then I realize it, I become conscious, and then I do it consciously later. But a lot of the things I learn, I've learned unconsciously. And I think that is probably most of us, just overall. But maybe there are people out there who do everything consciously. I don't have that gift currently. That is one I would love to develop, but I'm going to surrender to the fact that maybe it's okay that I don't know it all or have that perspective all the time. Maybe that's a gift too. In any case, it is powerful. It is potent. Now, it's not as easy as surrendering and saying, okay, that's it. My part in this is done. I claim, like no responsibility for anything forward. No, 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 no. Dear ones, it doesn't work that way. So essentially, what happens after that is when you get intuition, when hints and guidance show up, you're expected to co-create again because that is source, that is God putting the ball back in your court. So you don't get to pull back from the co-creation. You've just engaged properly with your divine partner So that's not the time to drop the ball. And sometimes it can feel a little weird. It can feel a little counterintuitive. As you were listening to Monica last episode, and she was talking about, higher self, when higher self comes in and it's a neutral, not usually an urgent voice, not usually a very loud voice, but it comes with a feeling, a strong feeling of this is what it is, like almost as though presenting fact. At least that's how it feels for me most of the time. The ego is usually louder. The fears are usually louder. They're louder, they're more urgent, they make you feel like it's important. And so when I was led next to take a series of steps, like booking the trip to Oregon, meeting my now spouse, who was a stranger who I only knew on the internet, um, that was a lot of risk that co creation was asking me to assume and to take steps toward. Yeah, I surrendered, but it wasn't like Spirit said, "Hey, paid your plane ticket, off you go." It's not. You're going to have a safe, secure situation when you land. No, there was risk. There were some things for me to be curious and have discernment around for sure. Some of it, though, I will say, did feel right in line. It's hard to explain because there were some steps that I just knew. It was that clear, cognizant feeling of I just know, I don't know how I know, but I just know I need to do this. And sometimes we can do that, and then we can start to have those expectations and have specific outcomes, and it won't match up. But in the just doing, you may end up somewhere that you need to be, not because of the thing you think, but maybe something else that's perfectly timed. And if you didn't go, you would miss it. I've had a lot of those as well. And they seem to kind of pop up with this process of surrender, interestingly enough. So as soon as you surrender, you're not just handing it off. It's okay. The ball's in your court because I have nowhere to move. The ball comes back and it's like, "Oh, okay, now it's my turn to run it. Now I've been given a play. I have to run it down the field," right? I don't know why I'm talking sports. I'm not a big sports enthusiast. I've watched enough of it to know some terms, but that's about it. So it's not a passing the buck kind of situation. We're not letting go of any responsibility or accountability. So, if anything, it's almost a test of moments to then show up and follow the guidance. And if the guidance is leave the relationship, move, find this other job, say no to this thing, say yes to that thing, you surrendered and the guidance showed up. So now you have to follow it to see where it goes. That doesn't mean you have to be perfect. You can fumble, you can make mistakes. There'll be different opportunities. But a lot of people get stuck in that way and then they end up going right back into that dark night of the soul because they don't want to take the risk on following the intuitions that come up. So that can be a tricky part. I would say that that's part of one of the cons of practicing surrender as a spiritual practice. You don't want to use it and go into a place of not non-attachment, but of not having like enough action. You don't want to go into passivity, I think is the word I'm looking for. Uh, you don't want to go into a place of I'm no longer co-creating. I'm just gonna sit here and wait for whatever universe decides to hand me. Not ideal either. And so it's easy, I think, to do stuff like that, and that can be a pretty significant, substantial drawback. Looking at that, another one. Um, I think for some people it can be a risk of escapism. Of okay, I'm gonna hand this off, and I'm not gonna deal with it. I'm gonna put it out of sight, out of mind. And I think there's a difference between having that relief of alleviating the stress and the strain when we surrender something versus I don't want to deal with this, so I'm just going to shove this over here and call it good. Not the same thing, right? So that's, one thing to consider. I haven't seen too many people get stuck with that, thankfully, but I think it can happen sometimes. Another thing when we're surrendering, we want to do it from a place where we're maintaining our power. It's not about giving up or giving over power. It's about learning to be more in alignment with universe, more in alignment with source, with the higher. And it's more about learning how to walk alongside of, or we're not leading, we're not following, we are participating equally. And kind of makes me think of like that Footsteps poem that Christians like, because I grew up Christian, and so I remember that poem quite well, where at one point there's only one set of footsteps. But I think we need to do that. It can't be a total, okay, I'm giving up. I'm capitulating. I'm handing over my power. I don't know how to do anything. That's not where we want to go from. We want to go from, I'm going to actively show up, do my best, and be open to the possibilities and non attached to the outcomes or expectations that I've got in order to see what big points on the map you'd like to lead me to. And I know that my part of it is the getting from A to B, the journey in between, and that I can have different vibrational frequencies of journeys and I get to choose and explore. And there's something wonderful about that. For me, there's been a peace, a tranquility, a stillness. And I think the best part, one of the pros of this, beyond all the others I've mentioned, is I found a certain level of not self-reliance, I want to say self-trust, because I rose to the occasions and I chose to walk hand in hand with Source and to co create in that way. I've learned that I can trust myself in sketchy situations no matter what's happening. That I've become a person of quality that I can rely and count on to do things well. So, I mean, perfect? No, and that's okay. But for the most part, I've learned that I've got good integrity and that I like my odds. I've got some pretty great skills, some wonderful strategy. I've got a lot of courage. And I think in this journey, as you explore surrender, you'll see that and you'll learn that as about you as well. And I feel like that is immensely important and crucial is the relationship with self that you develop on the spiritual journey. So we've talked a bit about when to practice. We've talked about how to practice. We've talked about when not to practice because we're not just going into passivity or giving up our power. I'd love to hear your questions about surrender and also your experiences. Have you surrendered? What did that look like for you? What did that feel like? What did that entail? And then what unfolded in the near future after? For me, it's been powerful. It's been times of change, of growth, of aligning to a higher timeline than I had within my mental possibilities. This is not a word, but let's pretend like it is. Um, that I couldn't have seen. Like I couldn't have imagined better outcomes. Well, I want to know what it's like for you. Come on and share some comments and let me know so that we can kind of keep delving into this topic of surrender because it's one that I feel like has been one of the best, biggest lessons I've learned and practices. And so it can be a regular spiritual practice. So some of the times when I find I need to do that, I will say one time was when I was really entrenched in like a codependent caregiving type of situation. That was a time when that was needed, sometimes several times over. Another time is being a military spouse. I, for someone who is married to someone active duty, when the call comes to up and change position and move, we don't always have time. We don't always have say. There are so many variables as trying to run a business. It quickly gets to be too much. And so overwhelm can begin to manage. And then often what I find is I remember, oh, right, surrender. And I come back to that, okay, God, universe, source, move me where you need me. I trust that you have something bigger and better in mind than I can even put together with my little basic human letter blocks that we play with as toddlers, because I feel like often that's the perspective we have as humans. We don't get the bigger one unless you're doing these quantum kinds of work where you're working with the higher consciousness. We just don't. And so often that's what I do. And I find that right at those moments when I think, oh God, how are we going to do this? How are we going to do that? We're going to have to sell our house. We're going to have to do this, this, that, and the other. And it's easy to go into panic and trying to over control. And instead, I've learned, okay, I'm trusting there is something bigger and better wanting to arrive for me. I am going to get out of the way of that. I am just going to allow it because I know from practice now, many, many times, that it's always better. And that it's always higher vibration and going to be rich with opportunities for me to self-develop and grow even more and to encounter things I never thought would be possible. So that is one of my bigger, more spiritual practices that I like to do. It's been one of the bigger lessons I've learned, and I've been in practice with it a lot, especially over the past 15 years. Absolutely. Absolutely. So, how else can we do this? You can practice in meditation. It can be a quiet moment, ideally not on the bathroom floor at 2 to 3 a.m. in the morning, covered in snot and every other liquid that wants to leave your body, but rather it can be, you could journal it out. You could actually create a beautiful page of things you're surrendering. What if your Tosha Silver God box is actually a journal page and your entries are things that you write very, very sincerely? You could write it into what Robert Ohotto called soul prayers. And when he was referencing soul prayers, he's talking about praying in a way not of to get things, but rather change me, help me see, open my eyes, let me know what I'm not knowing or seeing so that I can do things better, that I can head to the direction that you know is fated and destined for me, that I don't yet, consciously at least. So that's another way to do that. Um, Prayer itself, just as a dialogue with source, that's powerful. I think when you're going to do something like that, again, you have to let go of that expectation of what it's going to be like to receive an answer from source or a higher power. We often get in our way with that one. I see it all the time with quantum healing hypnosis for sure. But it's a beautiful practice. It's important. It's helpful. It's formative. It's one of the best spiritual tools that I've known to make big changes in a very little time. And I hope that it serves you well. I'd love to hear about your experiences, your practices. Let me know. But for this week, this has been a joy. This is Amanda M. Dodd wishing you bright blessings, beautiful healing, and stay inspired in everything you do. And I will see you soon. I'm going to have to record something while I'm in Vegas, and so that hopefully your episodes are uninterrupted. And when I come back, I'm going to have all kinds of fun stories and things to share about my experiences in Vegas, the things that I've learned, and the things I might recommend for you. In any case, bright blessings. And if you're in that place, it's okay to surrender. It doesn't mean that you like it. It just means you're acknowledging what is and the power that you have within it. Bye for now.